Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
No one dared touch the alien princess. So why could I? Her skin is poison. Her heart is off limits. But when I brushed her fingers, the entire empire gasped. And so did she. The first thing you need to understand about Princess Zara'thel of the Nexari Empire is that she had never been touched by another living being. Not once in her 23 solar cycles of existence. Not a hand on her shoulder. Not a brush of fingers. Not even an accidental bump in a crowded corridor. The few who had tried lay entombed in the crystalline crypts beneath the imperial palace, their bodies perfectly preserved in the moment of their deaths. Twisted in anguish, skin blackened, eyes wide with the terror of their final breath. The second thing you need to understand is that I was nobody special. Dr. Marcus Chen, xenobiology researcher, freshly assigned to the diplomatic mission aboard the Starship Meridian. My credentials were solid but unremarkable. My background clearance came back clean but boring. The kind of person who spent more time cataloging alien bacteria than attending embassy parties. The kind of person who definitely shouldn't have been in the same room as galactic royalty. But bureaucratic errors have a way of changing destinies. Dr. Chen. Ambassador Reeves barely glanced up from his tablet as I entered his office. You're being reassigned. I set down my coffee, careful not to spill it on the data pads scattered across his desk. Sir, the bacterial cultures from Kepler 442b are just reaching critical growth phase. If I leave now, the cultures will survive without you. He finally looked up, his gray eyes tired. We need a cultural liaison for the Nexari delegation. Dr. Petrov was supposed to handle it, but she's been hospitalized with Altarian flu. A cultural liaison? Sir, with all due respect, I study microorganisms. I don't do diplomacy. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You speak 12 languages, including ancient Nexari. You've published extensively on biochemical communication in non-carbon-based life forms. And most importantly, you're the only person on this ship who isn't scared of them. That last part wasn't entirely true. The Nexari delegation terrified me as much as anyone else. They were beautiful in the way that a neutron star is beautiful, magnificent, alien, and utterly deadly. Their skin shimmered with a bioluminescent pattern that shifted like aurora across their bodies. Their eyes were deep wells of silver that seemed to see through matter itself. And everything they touched withered and died. Everything except their own kind, and even then, physical contact was limited to formal rituals. The Nexari were a species that had evolved beyond touch, beyond the messy physical intimacies that defined most biological life. They communicated through chemical signals, emotional resonance, and something their scientists called sympathetic neural harmonics, a process I'd only read about in classified xenobiology journals. 3 days later, I found myself in Conference Room Alpha, watching Princess Zara'thel glide through the doorway like she was floating on invisible currents. She moved with a grace that defied the artificial gravity, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her in patterns that seemed to bend light itself. Her retinue followed at precisely measured distances, never closer than 3 meters, never farther than 5. Your Highness! Ambassador Reeves bowed in the formal Nexari style, hands pressed together, eyes downcast. We are honored by your presence. I tried to mirror his posture, but my eyes kept drifting upward. Princess Zara'thel was impossible to describe adequately. Her skin wasn't quite skin as humans understood it. It was more like living metal, silver blue and translucent, with veins of light pulsing beneath the surface. Her hair floated around her head like she was underwater, each strand seeming to have its own agenda. And her eyes met mine. The room temperature dropped 5 degrees. I felt it through my bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. One of her retainers hissed something in rapid Nexari, a warning probably. Another moved to block the line of sight between us, but she raised one slender hand, and they stepped back. You are the one called Dr. Chen. Her voice was like wind chimes made of ice. When she spoke, small frost crystals formed in the air near her lips before dissolving. The biochemist. Yes, Your Highness. My voice came out steadier than I'd expected. I'm honored to serve as your cultural liaison during these negotiations. Cultural liaison. She repeated the words as if tasting them. How curious. Tell me, Dr. Chen, what is your understanding of Nexari culture? The question felt like a test. Behind her, Ambassador Reeves was making subtle gestures. Keep it simple, don't lecture, protocols. But something in her silver eyes told me she wanted more than diplomatic platitudes. Your people evolved on Nexus Prime under a red giant sun. I began. In an environment where radiation levels would be lethal to most carbon-based life. Your biochemistry adapted not just to survive, but to thrive on what would poison other species. Physical touch became dangerous, but you developed other forms of connection. Emotional resonance through bioelectric fields. Chemical communication through skin secretions. Your entire society is built around intimacy without contact. Her head tilted slightly, the Nexari equivalent of raised eyebrows. Continue. The royal family carries the highest concentration of defensive toxins. It's a genetic trait that makes you the most protected, but also the most isolated. You've never... I paused, realizing I was about to venture into extremely personal territory. Forgive me if I overstep. You were about to say I've never been touched. The temperature in the room seemed to stabilize, though I could see our breath now. This is not overmature. This is fact. Ambassador Reeves cleared his throat. Perhaps we should move on to the trade discussions. No. Princess Zara'thel's attention never left me. I find Dr. Chen's observations illuminating. Tell me, what else do you know of royal isolation? I glanced at Reeves, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. But the princess was still watching me with those impossible eyes, and I found myself telling the truth. I know it's killing you. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the walls. One of her retainers stepped forward, hand moving to what I assumed was a weapon. But Zara'thel raised her hand again, and he froze. Explain. I took a breath that misted in the increasingly cold air. Your species developed touch aversion as a survival mechanism. But isolation, complete isolation, wasn't part of the evolutionary design. I've studied the neurochemical patterns in Nexari brain scans. The royal family shows signs of chronic emotional dysregulation, sensory deprivation syndrome, and what we might call contact hunger. You're evolutionarily programmed to need some form of physical connection, even if conventional touch is impossible. You speak as if you know this from personal experience. Her voice had gotten softer, more dangerous. I do. The words surprised me as much as they surprised everyone else in the room. Not the poison part, but I understand isolation. It was true, though I'd never articulated it quite like that before. Years of being the quiet one, the researcher, the person who spoke more comfortably to computers than people. The colleague who ate lunch alone not because he was antisocial, but because small talk felt like navigating a minefield. I understood being untouchable, even if my untouchability was psychological rather than biological. Something shifted in her expression. For just a moment, the regal mask slipped, and I saw something raw underneath. Loneliness so profound it was almost gravitational. Then the moment passed, and she was the princess again. These negotiations will continue tomorrow, she announced. Dr. Chen, you will attend. Alone. Ambassador Reeves started to protest, but she was already gliding toward the exit, her retinue flowing around her like a precisely choreographed dance. At the doorway, she paused. Tell me, Dr. Chen, in all your research on impossible things, have you ever encountered something that shouldn't exist, and yet does? Before I could answer, she was gone, leaving only the scent of ozone and the slowly warming air. I spent the night reading every classified file I could access about the Nexari royal family. Most of it was speculation, but a pattern emerged. Princess Zara'thel was the 7th in her line to inherit the throne. The previous 6 had all died young, not from disease or assassination, but from what the files euphemistically called neural cascade failure. In human terms, they died of loneliness. Their brains had simply stopped working. The irony was bitter. The very trait that made them perfect rulers, the deadly touch that no one could challenge, also made them incapable of the most basic biological need for connection. They ruled an empire of billions, surrounded by subjects who revered them, protected by bodyguards who would die for them, and yet they lived in a bubble of absolute solitude. I was still reading when my door chimed. The chronometer showed 0300 hours ship time. No one should be awake except the night shift. Dr. Chen. Her voice came through the intercom like winter moonlight. May I enter? I opened the door to find her standing in the corridor alone. No retinue, no bodyguards, no observers. Just Princess Zara'thel of the Nexari Empire, looking smaller somehow without her entourage. Your Highness? Is everything? May I come in? She asked again. I realized this is highly irregular. I stepped aside, and she glided into my quarters. The temperature immediately began dropping, and I could see her bioluminescent patterns pulsing brighter in the dimmed lighting. She looked around the small space. My desk covered with research materials, half-empty coffee cups, a few personal photos from Earth. You live alone, she observed. Yes, most researchers do. Easier to focus. And you prefer this? The solitude. I considered lying, giving her the polite answer. But something about the way she stood there, so still, so careful not to touch anything, made me want to be honest. No, I've just gotten used to it. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. I have never been inside another being's private space before. It's smaller than I expected. Human living quarters usually are, compared to Nexari standards. Not the space. She turned to face me, and her eyes were brighter now, almost glowing. The psychological space. The distance between thought and fear. I didn't understand what she meant, but before I could ask, she moved to the viewport. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue marble against the star field. Your homeworld, she said. I've read about it. Billions of beings crowded together, touching constantly. They embrace when they meet. They hold hands to show affection. They even sleep together, skin against skin. The longing in her voice was so palpable I could taste it in the increasingly frigid air. It's not perfect, I said. Human contact comes with its own problems. Disease transmission, boundary violations, unwanted intimacy. Sometimes I think you're better off without it. She laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. Better off? Dr. Chen, do you know what I feel when I see your kind touching each other so casually? Such overwhelming envy that it manifests as physical pain. My neurons fire in patterns that my species doesn't have words for. I dream of sensations I've never experienced and wake up with phantom memories of touches that never happened. I moved closer without thinking, stopping just outside the cold field that surrounded her. That sounds awful. It is. She pressed one hand against the viewport, and frost spread across the transparent metal in delicate patterns. But today, when our eyes met, I felt something different. The neural harmonics were unusual. Unusual how? She turned back to me, and I realized I could see my breath now. The cold field around her was intensifying. When two Nexari achieve emotional resonance, our bioelectric fields synchronize. It's our equivalent of your physical contact. But with you, the harmonics were familiar yet impossible. Like recognizing a song I've never heard. I don't understand. Neither do I. She took a step closer, and I felt the cold like a physical pressure against my chest. Which is why I must ask you something, though it violates every protocol of my people. The air between us was crystallizing now, tiny ice particles forming and dissolving in the gap of space we maintained. What do you want to ask? I want to know. She paused, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncertain, young, vulnerable. I want to know what it would feel like if you touched me. The question hung in the air between us like a challenge to physics itself. Your Highness, I would die. Yes, you would. She moved another step closer, and now I could feel the cold burning against my skin. But for a moment, before the toxins stopped your heart, you would feel what no living being has felt for 7 generations. And I would know just once what it means to be touched. We stood there at the edge of possibility, separated by maybe 3 feet and the entire history of evolutionary biology. I could see the patterns under her skin pulsing faster now, brighter. Her hair was moving like it was caught in invisible currents. There has to be another way, I said. Some kind of barrier, protective equipment. I've tried everything. Her voice was barely a whisper. Energy fields, quantum barriers, material shields. Nothing stops the toxins. The romantic novels I read in secret speak of star-crossed lovers separated by duty or distance. But I am separated by the fundamental laws of biology. She was crying, though Nexari tears were different from human ones. Tiny droplets of silver that evaporated before they could fall, leaving only the scent of metal and starlight. I reached out instinctively, wanting to comfort her, then stopped just before entering her field of cold death. And that's when it happened. My hand, suspended in the air between us, began to tingle. Not with cold, but with something else. A warmth that didn't make sense, spreading from my fingertips up through my arm. The air around my hand shimmered, and for a moment, I could swear I felt something brushing against my palm. Princess Zara'thel gasped, a sound like wind through crystal caverns. What? She stared at my outstretched hand. What are you doing? I don't know. The tingling sensation intensified, and now I could definitely feel something. Not quite touch, but pressure, texture, warmth. Do you feel that? Her bioluminescent patterns were going wild now, cascading across her skin in colors I'd never seen before. I feel. She raised her own hand, positioning it opposite mine in the space between us. The cold field around her flickered, wavered, and for just an instant, disappeared entirely. Our palms met, skin touched skin, and neither of us died. The sensation was unlike anything I'd experienced. It wasn't just the physical feeling of her hand against mine, though that was remarkable enough. Her skin was warm, not cold, with a texture like silk over steel. But there was more, much more. The moment our skin made contact, something opened in my mind. Suddenly I could feel what she felt. Not just the physical sensation, but the emotion behind it. 23 years of untouchable isolation, melting away in the space of a heartbeat. Joy so overwhelming it threatened to stop my heart, not through poison, but through pure intensity. And I could sense her feeling what I felt. The amazement, the impossibility, the deep recognition of finding someone who understood the weight of loneliness. We stood there, palm to palm, for maybe 5 seconds. Then the shock of what had happened hit us both simultaneously, and we jerked apart. She stumbled backward, her usual grace completely abandoned. The cold field snapped back into place around her, and the temperature in the room plummeted so quickly that frost formed on every surface, including my eyelashes. That's impossible, she breathed. You should be dead. I should have killed you. I stared at my hand where hers had touched it. The skin was unmarked, unburned, completely normal except for the phantom sensation of her palm still lingering like a warm echo. I don't understand this any more than you do, I said. But I'm alive. And you touched me. She was shaking now, though I wasn't sure if it was from shock or something else. The toxins, they should have. Every simulation, every biological model. What if the models are wrong? The idea was forming as I spoke it. What if there's something about us specifically that changes the equation? Us specifically? She looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I was thinking out loud now, my scientific mind trying to process the impossible. Your biotoxins are evolutionarily designed to kill carbon-based life forms. But what if there's a specific neurochemical compatibility that neutralizes them? Some kind of immunological harmony? That would require. She paused, her eyes widening. It would require an extremely specific genetic marker. Something that occurs in perhaps 1 in several billion individuals. Something that might explain why I've always felt different, I said softly. Why I've never quite fit with other humans. Why I'm comfortable around your people when others are terrified. We looked at each other across the frosted space of my quarters, both of us beginning to understand that we'd discovered something that shouldn't exist but did. A biological impossibility that had been waiting 23 years for us to find each other. This changes everything, she whispered. Yes, it does. The silence stretched between us, filled with possibilities and implications neither of us was ready to voice. Finally, she moved toward the door. I must return to my quarters before my absence is noticed. But Dr. Chen, Marcus, I said. My name is Marcus. Something softened in her expression. Marcus, We will speak of this again. Yes, we will. She paused at the threshold, looking back. The negotiations tomorrow. Will you attend? Of course. Good. She hesitated, then added quietly. I have spent my entire life believing I would die alone, untouched, unloved. In the space of 5 seconds, you have shown me that impossible things can be real. I don't know what this means for us, or for our peoples, but I know this. I will not let this gift be wasted. After she left, I sat in my gradually warming quarters and stared at my hand for hours. The phantom sensation of her touch lingered, more real than dreams, more impossible than fiction. I had touched the untouchable princess of the Nexari Empire, and lived. More than that, for those 5 seconds, I had felt the deepest connection of my life. Not just physical contact, but soul recognizing soul across the vast distances of biology and culture. Tomorrow would bring questions, investigations, probably medical examinations and biochemical analysis. The treaty negotiations would become secondary to understanding what had happened between us. But tonight, alone in my quarters, I held the memory of her hand in mine and understood for the first time that some barriers exist only until the right person comes along to dissolve them. The next morning brought chaos. I woke to my door chiming insistently and Commander Torres standing in my corridor with a full security detail. Dr. Chen, you're needed in Medical Bay 7 immediately. What's the situation? Princess Zara'thel has requested a full medical examination. She says there's been a significant biological event that requires investigation. Torres looked skeptical. She specifically requested that you be present. Medical Bay 7 had been converted into a sterile research facility with every piece of xenobiology equipment the ship carried. Dr. Sarah Kim, our chief xenobiologist, was running scanner after scanner over the princess, who sat with remarkable patience considering the nature of Nexari royalty. Ah, Dr. Chen. Dr. Kim looked up as I entered. Perhaps you can explain this. On the monitor screen, a complex biochemical readout showed Princess Zara'thel's cellular structure. Even to my trained eye, something looked wrong. The toxin production in Her Highness's skin has dropped by 60% since yesterday, Dr. Kim continued. Her bioelectric field is operating on an entirely different harmonic frequency. And most fascinating of all, she highlighted a section of the scan. Her neural chemistry shows signs of significant activity in regions that have been dormant since birth. Princess Zara'thel met my eyes. I told Dr. Kim that I experienced an unexpected biological interaction yesterday. She insists this is impossible. Impossible is a strong word, I said carefully. May I see the full scan? Dr. Kim pulled up a detailed molecular analysis. These patterns suggest that Her Highness has undergone some kind of genetic activation, like dormant DNA suddenly expressing itself. But there's no known trigger for. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen. Dr. Chen, I need to scan you. I'm sorry, something in your presence is affecting the readings. Look, she pointed to the monitor. As I'd moved closer to Princess Zara'thel, the toxin levels in her skin had dropped even further. What did you do yesterday? I glanced at the princess. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. We had physical contact. The silence in the medical bay was deafening. Dr. Kim dropped her scanner. Commander Torres stepped forward, hand moving to her sidearm. That's impossible, Dr. Kim said finally. You'd be dead. And yet, Princess Zara'thel said dryly, he appears to be remarkably healthy. How? Dr. Kim was already reaching for another scanner. How did you survive contact with Nexari royal toxins? That's what we're here to find out. The next 2 hours were a blur of medical scans, genetic analysis, and biochemical modeling. What we discovered defied everything we thought we knew about Nexari biology, and human biology as well. My DNA contained a variant that occurred in approximately 1 in 5 billion humans. A mutation in the genes responsible for immune system function that should have been evolutionarily neutral. Useless. But when exposed to Nexari biotoxins, this variant produced a counteragent that didn't just neutralize the poison, it seemed to harmonize with it, creating a symbiotic reaction. It's like a biological key and lock, Dr. Kim explained to the gathered diplomats and scientists. Dr. Chen's genetic variant specifically neutralizes Princess Zarathel's toxins. Not just any Nexari. The scans show this reaction is unique to her specific biochemical signature. Ambassador Reeves leaned forward. You're saying they're biologically compatible? More than compatible, Dr. Kim said. The interaction seems to benefit both parties. Dr. Chen's presence reduces the princess's toxin production, while her bioelectric field enhances his neurological function. It's symbiotic. Princess Zara'thel had been listening with growing fascination. Dr. Kim, what do your models predict would happen with extended contact? Extended contact? Dr. Kim looked alarmed. Your Highness, even with the neutralization effect, we can't be certain. I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking for your professional assessment. Dr. Kim consulted her readings reluctantly. The data suggests that prolonged contact could result in permanent biochemical changes for both parties. The princess's toxin production might adapt to become completely harmless to Dr. Chen, while his immune system could develop enhanced resistance to other Nexari biohazards. Permanent changes, Ambassador Reeves said slowly. You mean they'd be bonded? Biologically, in a sense, yes. The scans suggest that their bioelectric fields are already beginning to synchronize. With extended contact, they could develop a form of codependent symbiosis. I felt everyone's eyes on me. The political implications were staggering. A human who could touch the untouchable Nexari princess? It would change the balance of galactic politics, alter the fundamental understanding of interspecies relations, challenge the very foundations of Nexari society. But all I could think about was the feeling of her hand in mine, and the devastating loneliness I'd seen in her silver eyes. How extended are we talking about? I asked. Dr. Kim hesitated. The models suggest permanent. Once the biochemical bond is fully established, separation could be psychologically and physically traumatic for both parties. Princess Zara'thel stood gracefully, her decision already made. Dr. Chen, I am formally requesting that you serve as my personal cultural liaison for the remainder of these negotiations. The position would require close proximity to ensure optimal diplomatic outcomes. The room erupted in discussion, debate, and barely contained panic. Ambassador Reeves was calculating political ramifications. Dr. Kim was muttering about the need for more tests. Commander Torres was clearly wondering if this constituted a security breach. But Princess Zara'thel only looked at me, waiting for my answer. I thought about my small, solitary quarters. My research that nobody else quite understood. The years of eating lunch alone and avoiding small talk and never quite connecting with another human being. Then I thought about 5 seconds of contact that had felt like coming home. I accept, I said. 3 weeks later, I stood in the observation lounge of the Meridian, watching the Nexari homeworld grow larger in the viewport. Princess Zara'thel stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her bioelectric field, which no longer carried any trace of toxins. Dr. Kim had been right about the permanent changes. My presence had completely neutralized her deadly touch, while her bioelectric field had somehow enhanced my cognitive function to superhuman levels. More importantly, the emotional connection we'd felt in that first touch had deepened into something neither human nor Nexari had words for. We could communicate without speaking now, emotion flowing between us through the synchronized bioelectric fields. When she was frightened, I felt it as a chill in my bones. When I was excited about a new discovery, she experienced it as colors dancing under her skin. Are you ready for this? She asked, though she already knew the answer through our connection. As ready as I can be. I took her hand, casually, easily, the way humans did 1,000 times a day without thinking about it. The simple miracle of it still amazed us both. Your people are going to be surprised. She laughed, the sound like wind chimes that had learned to be joyful. Surprised is one word for it. The Royal Council has been in emergency session since we announced our engagement. Engagement was the closest human translation for what we'd become. The Nexari had no word for what happened when two beings bonded bioelectrically and emotionally to the point where separation became impossible. The closest equivalent in their language meant something like neural codependency with romantic implications. I squeezed her hand gently. No regrets. She turned to face me fully, her silver eyes bright with something that I now knew was love. A word that existed in Nexari, but had never been applied to the royal family before. Marcus, in 23 years of life, you have given me every good thing I've ever experienced. The first touch, the first connection, the first time I felt complete instead of broken. She lifted our joined hands, marveling at the simple impossibility of it. My only regret is that we met so late in my life. 23 isn't late. It is when you've been dying of loneliness since birth. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching her homeworld approach. The negotiations had concluded successfully, helped, no doubt, by the fact that the primary obstacle to human Nexari relations, the deadly touch of the royal family, had been definitively solved. Trade agreements had been signed, cultural exchange programs established. The foundation for a new era of interspecies cooperation laid. But the real miracle wasn't political. It was standing here, holding hands with someone who understood what it meant to be isolated by biology and finding out that connection was possible after all. The council will want to study us, she said. Run tests, document the bond, understand how it happened. Will you let them? She considered this. Some tests, yes. This discovery is too important to hoard. There could be others like us out there, humans and Nexari, who are biologically compatible. They deserve to find each other. And the other tests? Her smile was answer enough. Some things were too precious to dissect, too personal to share with science. The exact nature of our bond, the way we could feel each other's emotions, the dreams we shared when we slept, those were ours alone. Marcus. Her voice was softer now, uncertain in a way that was becoming rare. What is it? Are you afraid of what we're becoming? The changes to your biology, to your mind. You're not entirely human anymore. I thought about it seriously. Since our bond had stabilized, I'd noticed the changes. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved memory, emotional perceptions that extended beyond human norms. I was becoming something new, something that existed in the space between human and Nexari. No, I said finally. I'm not afraid. Are you? I was. For the first time in my life, I had something to lose. Someone to lose. She leaned against me. A casual intimacy that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. But then I realized that whatever we're becoming it together. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All passengers and crew, prepare for atmospheric entry. Arrival at Nexus Prime capital city in 30 minutes. She straightened, slipping back into her royal bearing. But she didn't let go of my hand. Together, I agreed. The observation lounge filled with other passengers eager to see the Nexari homeworld. But they maintained their careful distance from us. Word had spread throughout the ship about the princess who could now be touched and the human who could touch her. We'd become something of a legend. A story people would tell their grandchildren. As Nexus Prime filled the viewport, a world of crystalline cities and aurora-painted skies, I thought about the events that had brought us here. A bureaucratic error that put me in the wrong meeting room. A moment of honest conversation about loneliness. 5 seconds of contact that changed the fundamental laws of biology. Do you think it was coincidence? I asked. Us finding each other? Princess Zara'thel squeezed my hand, and I felt her amusement through our bond. Dr. Chen, Marcus, you're a scientist. Do you believe in coincidence? I considered this. The statistical probability of our meeting, combined with the 1 in 5 billion genetic variant that made our connection possible, multiplied by the chances that we'd both be emotionally ready to take such an impossible risk. No, I said. I don't think I do. Neither do I. The ship shuddered slightly as we entered the planet's atmosphere. Below us, the capital city sparkled like a constellation that had decided to visit the ground. Somewhere down there waited a new life, new challenges, and undoubtedly new forms of impossibility to navigate. But as we descended toward the surface of an alien world, I wasn't nervous. How could I be, when I was holding the hand of the one person in the galaxy who understood that love was just another way of saying the laws of physics don't apply to us? Princess Zara'thel of the Nexari Empire had never been touched by another living being, until she was. And in that touching, we discovered that sometimes the most fundamental barriers exist only until the right person comes along to dissolve them, one impossible moment at a time. The end.